I'd like to share with you a short video clip demonstrating the expectation in exams. I had earlier provided you with an article that discussed the imposition of excise tax on sugary drinks in Berkeley. And so the idea is that's how the typical exam question will read. In the article below, there is a conversation or discussion on the impact of excise tax on sugary drinks in Berkeley, using economic models, examine the impact of tax on sugary drinks, and so forth. So you start off with the first step is decide what is the product or service. In this case is the sugary drinks. Okay, so therefore that would be your starting point. You develop a market model, quantity of sugary drinks, and this has to be always the price of the same product. It is one of those areas that many make mistakes. They put product or service on a horizontal quantity and then put price of something else, or cost, or emotions, or public policy, all sorts of other things on the vertical axis, and that's incorrect. The market model that basically takes the supply and demand is the relationship between quantity and price of the same good. Also, whatever you decide here, the vertical axis would be price of sugary drinks. If this was patient care, this would be the price of patient care. So there is a production or supply of sugary drinks. There is nothing particular about it. It is cheap to make, your transport, etc. is a high profit margin and so forth. So you could argue that the supply curve, in fact, is very easy to produce and distribute. Supply curve is relatively flat. What that means is that if the supply curve is flat, as opposed to steep, means that production can be expanded from this level to this level very easily without much cost pressure, and so therefore price doesn't have to rise very much. This is in contrast, let's say, to a situation where producing one or some additional unit of a product, it becomes very complicated, and so therefore expansion of the production from one level to even slightly higher level of production will result in high cost runs due to the complexity, lack of availability of resources, etc. And imagine that we are constructing one space shuttle, and then somebody wants to throw one more. And to round up the engineering talent and the resources and all that is very complicated, and it doesn't happen that easily. Or if you perform one neurosurgery and then you have to do the next, it involves quite a bit of preliminary investigation, imaging, tests, and consultation with all sorts of colleagues and so forth in order to perform one more. So therefore cost will shoot up and the price must rise accordingly to justify it. So here I'm going to argue that sugary drinks are easy to make, even flatter than this supply curve for the sake of the argument. And there's a demand side for this. I'm not at this point making any particular argument as to how price sensitive consumers are. So therefore, I'm not giving it a particular slope to this demand curve. Now we impose tax, excise tax. This is the equilibrium market price, and this is the quantity consumed. And then some tax, few pennies per ounce or bottle is added, let's say. So therefore, the supply shifts to the left, and this would be supply with the tax. Okay. Now, where is the new equilibrium? The new equilibrium happens to be here. And so for that reason, the quantity, if you trace it downward, the quantity demanded will shift to the left as a result of higher prices. Because of the new price, some buyers have dropped out. So essentially, you decide on the product, you develop a simple market model, you make assumptions to make assumptions about elasticity of demand and supply, draw demand and supply curves, establish initial equilibrium, P and Q, and then step 3, work in the dynamic of the scenario. So here we established initial equilibrium, and then we talked about how taxes impacts the cost of delivery, and so therefore leftward shift in the supply curve, and then the new equilibrium is arrived at, and there's a logical conclusion. Higher taxes in a product will discourage some buyers to some degree. So that's the this outcome. Now there is a little conversation in there that this reduction in consumption or demand as a result of higher price is not only to higher price, but also people cut back because of the publicity around introduction of the tax that made some people aware that why the government is imposing tax. Well, they are concerned about public health, and so therefore some of the reduction in demand is not necessarily due to the price hike, but due to the sort of campaign. And then at the end is talking about that in fact in Mexico they tried the same thing, and initially consumers reacted by reducing the demand for sugary drinks, but then it rebounded. If that could by itself be an exam question, what happens when people rebound? When you raise the price on an item, people buy less because they lose at a higher price. This item is not as valuable as it used to be, and so therefore they cut back. And if in terms of the utility theory, this is the quantity of sugary drinks, and this is the total utility. There's a utility function, and then due to higher price, people feel that it's not worth the money, and therefore they basically cut back. And when you cut back, what's consumed at this level has a higher marginal utility than when it was at the higher level. So this utility drops, marginal utility gets bigger and bigger when you come this direction. The rate of change is getting bigger and bigger coming back. So when people cut back, the units that they consume is more enjoyable than previously. So therefore, that's the idea there. And then it looks like let's say in the case of Mexico, after 2 years, the campaign died out. Maybe the sugar drink industry added to their ad campaign and stimulated the taste for it, and people went back and began to consume a higher level again. But this is just an extra conversation. We were pretty much done by the time you decided on the what is the product or service that you need to examine. You developed a market model, made assumptions about demand and supply elasticities, and then incorporated the dynamic of the question and demonstrated a new equilibrium, and you're done. So your writing would be very concise and short. You show the model first, and then very short sentences to explain exactly what assumptions you have made and what is the final outcome. I hope this is helpful.